you very much for the invitation to be here today. And obviously it's a real bonus that there's such glorious weather in this beautiful part of the country. So as said, I'm Collette Cork-Hurst. I work at the Arts Council in the National Diversity team. I work with the Diversity Director, Abid Hussain. And today I've been asked to talk about the creative case for diversity and equality and diversity action in museums. So I'm just going to get right into it. So what I will cover is why creative case for diversity, why we think at the Arts Council that it's important, the misconceptions around creative case, what it means for museums, some examples of the practice, some rural issues, and these are really just some of my thoughts, and I'm sure you know more about this than I do. Then we'll look at workforce and boards, equality action plans, and taking action. So as part of the Arts Council 10-year strategy, we have 5 goals. And goal 1 is excellence is thriving and celebrated in the arts, museums and libraries. And for us, that means that the work produced by museums reflects the diversity of contemporary England. And that's why we invest in cultural organisations that are committed to equality and diversity and its applications in their work. And that's where creative case for diversity comes in. So I'm going to start with what creative case isn't, because as I said, there are some misconceptions. So it's not something that's separated from everything else that we do in our day-to-day work, or something that's thought about right at the end after all the important decisions have been made. It's not just work that's targeted specifically at diverse groups, but all of the work that we do. And I know that a lot of people think the creative case is about visitors and audiences, but although it is linked, we cover this in our equality action plans, which I will go through later. And it's not something that only large city museums can do, because everywhere is diverse. So what is creative case for diversity? It's an approach where what we do reflects the broad spectrum of contemporary society and responds to issues around race, ethnicity, faith, disability, age, gender, sexuality, class and economic disadvantage. And I know that sometimes we hear people saying, well, you know, diversity doesn't relate to us because in our area we don't have diversity. So it's really, really important that we understand that it encompasses all of those areas. And it's based on the principle of diversity being an integral part of the cultural process, with the creative potential that this brings. So including opportunities for organisations to collaborate, to innovate, to take risks, through embracing a wide range of influences and practice. So different voices and different perspectives. And this approach is also a bit of a shift away from seeing diversity purely in terms of a prescriptive part of equality legislation. And for the first time, museums in our national portfolio will be asked to contribute to create a case for diversity, and they will need to evidence how they're going to do this. And what does this mean for museums? So here's a section that's in our MPO guidance, and it says, what we are seeking is how the organisation evidences how diversity is embedded through their collections management and programming, and to what degree it is a key driver in informing and shaping their collections and programming. And I think that last part is really important, that it drives what we do. So, programs and collections, in practice, what does this mean? And I know that there are many museums that are already working in this way, and I look forward to hearing more about some of the work that you're doing on this. So, when developing programs, having diversity of thoughts and ideas can really help with innovation. So working with diverse practitioners and diverse organisations will help in this process. And museums can look at the most relevant ways to reach out and engage through, for example, use of networks, going into communities, and by working with other museums. For collections, this could be having a variety of interpretations to provide opportunities for bringing out what objects mean to different people. And by having diverse people involved in researching collections, this can also lead to finding different perspectives, and telling stories through diverse voices can make collections more relevant. As evidence for how museums are contributing to the creative case for diversity, this will be shown through peers, visitors, stakeholders, board papers, and the published programme and collection. An annual creative case for diversity ratings will be rated as met, not met, strong, or outstanding. So to bring this out a bit more, I'll be looking at 4 case studies, and they're just a few examples to show how some museums are already contributing to creative case. And I also know, and having just heard about some of the interesting work that's being done in Cornwall, with the setting up of the Rural Diversity Network, and I look forward to seeing the good things that happen from that. And as has been said, the great work that Tamina has been doing as a change maker is really welcome. And before going through these case studies, I will say that these are all, I think, quite large museums and in cities. And this is really because we haven't been given those case studies of the smaller museums and what they're doing. So I really look forward to receiving those so that we can use them to share best practice. So this is a bit of a call out to you that you can send us some information, and we'd be really happy to disseminate that. So the first example is Bristol Museum and Art Gallery. As part of their programme last year, they put on a celebration of migration. And this involved museum collections being produced by migrants, as well as tours from a migration lens, music and dance performances from around the world, talks with people about their own stories of migration, and to do all of this they worked closely with diverse organisations such as Bristol Refugee Rights, the Anglo-Polish Society, South Gloucestershire Chinese Association, and they also received some sponsorship from their local universities. So the second case study is Tyne and Weir Museums, where they wanted to reframe their collection with regards to disability. So through their Reframing Disability consultation, they worked with external arts and disability partners, academics and other museums, and they looked at everything but through rethinking their curatorial processes, community engagement, acquisition of objects and stories, documentation of objects, and methods of interpretation. And this showed that disability was represented, but there were a few gaps, I think particularly in terms of mental health and the diversity of disability. So as part of their response, they revised their acquisitions and disposal policy, and that was to make it more explicit, because so it has said that they will take disability into account, but this will show how disability will actually be represented in their collection. And I'm sure you've all got very similar stories that you could be sharing with us. So case 3, and this is Bridgeboard Museums, and they made a commitment that all interpretations will have a creative case for diversity focus. And they plan to highlight the experiences of immigrant workers, poverty, and the role of women at work. So, 3 very different areas in terms of diversity. It's also useful to note that they have strong community panels, which really helps with engagement. And they're currently working with a visually impaired artist to embed the creative case for diversity in their master plan. I don't know exactly what their master plan is, but it sounds like it's an approach that integrates the creative case for diversity in the planning process, so from the outset, which is really, really important. Case study 4 is Birmingham Museums and Art Gallery, where they have ambitious plans to reinvent the collection and a commitment to increase the diversity of commissioned artists and practitioners. So they have a new project called Story Lab, and that explores the different ways of looking at collections and telling those often untold stories. And Sarah Wahid, head of interpretation, collaborated with 6 local artists and activists. She's also on the Arts Council Changemaker. And so, for example, the traditional story is focused on Birmingham being a manufacturing centre. But the Past Is Now expands on this by describing how guns made in Birmingham could be exchanged for enslaved people in the west coast of Africa. And Sarah has said that it was only by working with a new curator who had specialist skills in this area and with the cultural activists that they kind of stumbled on stories that might surprise people. And as I say, I really look forward to hearing about your case studies and the good work that's being done. And these are just a couple of slides in terms of rural areas, and these are really just my thoughts, because as I say, I know that you'll know far more about this than I will. So in terms of some of the issues, being less people living in the area, less likely to have high BME population, some rural areas, like urban areas, having issues around levels of deprivation, and the small size of some of the museums in rural areas, which can be limited capacity and resources. So looking at some of the opportunities, some people may feel isolated, so reaching out and engaging with them and hearing their voices can be really welcome. It's also important to be able to work with different diverse groups and maybe bringing them together can help with participating in innovating your programs. It gives us an opportunity to review collections and how they reflect working lives, social class, political environment, which can bring out the stories and contributions of people from all walks of life. And it also gives the opportunity to have diverse programming and share ideas and resources with other museums in the area. And as I say, I know there are many other issues that museums face generally regarding being in a rural area, and no doubt these will be part of your discussions a bit later. So what does successful embedding of creative case for diversity look like? It will mean that the collections and interpretations of collections will be dynamic and fresh, that diverse and different perspectives will enhance the museum programmes, that diverse practitioners will have more opportunities to be involved in, influence and deliver programmes, and that museums will not stagnate and will continue to be places of excellence that are relevant and resilient. So that's really creative case. So I'm going to move on to workforce and governance. And this is from our strategy, Break Art and Culture for Everyone. It's our current strategy from 2010 to 20, and some of you may know that we're going to be starting to consult on our future strategy from 2020 onwards. So welcome all voices in being involved in that. So we want the leadership and workforce of the arts and cultural sector, especially the organisations we invest in, to reflect the diversity of the country and to ensure that there are fair routes to entry and career progression. So firstly, should we look at some information on workforce and boards in terms of our current major partner museums. So that's from our 2016 to 17 Equality and Diversity and Creative Case report. And looking at this, we can see that there are high levels of unknown data, which is quite a serious issue for us, because obviously we can't have a good picture in terms of what workforce and boards look like if there's lots of information that is unknown to us. So any views that you have on why this is the case and what more we can do to get that information would be really, really helpful. There are more women workers than men in the workforce. Disabled workers and black and minority ethnic workers are significantly underrepresented, and obviously this is across the board, so in terms of Cornwall there will be different issues. Despite women making up a larger majority of the workforce, there was a lower proportion on boards. BME people are underrepresented on boards, and disabled people had the same proportion on boards as in the workforce. So it will be quite interesting to see what the impact of having more museums in the portfolio will make to this information and how it will change, and hopefully how we can improve some of those figures. So here's some of the stats from the report. And these statistics are about all staff, so that includes permanent, contractual and voluntary staff. So in terms of gender in the workforce, it's 32% male, 51% female and 14% unknown. And as I said, this is regarding the major partner museums. On boards, it's 58% male, 38% female and 3% unknown. So that kind of does a twist really in terms of the workforce. Moving on to ethnicity, 4% of the workforce is black and minority ethnic, 43% white, British and Irish, and kind of for the first time we kind of split out white other from these figures, so that would include people from Europe and other parts. So that's 3% other, and we've got a really big figure of 36% unknown, so that makes quite a big difference. For boards, it's 2% BME, 38% white British or Irish, 2% white other, and 12% unknown. But we've got 46% prefer not to say. So that's quite a big percentage in terms of ethnicity, so there may be reasons for that, and again, I would be really interested to know what these reasons are. Moving on to disability, for the workforce, 4% is disabled, 40% not disabled, 36% unknown, again quite a high figure of unknown, and for boards, 4% disabled, 15% not disabled, 35% unknown, and again 36% prefer not to say. I would also say that the Arts Council is working on how we will collect data in terms of socio-economic factors. And as you saw earlier, we do include class and economic disadvantage in our equality and diversity work. So I'm sure that's an area that you're probably all working on as well, and may have some interesting insights into. Equality action plans. Can I just ask how many of you have seen this guide? Okay. All our hard work. Okay, well I would recommend it. It is really, really useful, and it covers diversifying workforce, boards and audiences, and gives some good ideas on how we can do this. And you just have to go onto the Arts Council website and put in Equality Action Plans Guide, and it will come up very easily. We also have produced a Culture Change Guide, which again looks at diversification and includes quite a lot of checklists which should help you in your work. So for national portfolio organisations, Band 1 organisations need to embed the actions on equality into their business plans. For Bands 2 and 3, they need to have a separate equality action plan. But obviously, all organisations, whether they're in the national portfolio or not, should have good equality action plans. And these need to be embedded across the whole organisation, so it's not just one person's job or someone else's job. We need to be able to see the value of them and the progress that's being made. They also need to be relevant to you and your circumstances. It's no point having an equality action plan that covers everything, some of which isn't relevant to you. So it's really important that it's relevant to you, your area, and the context in terms of where you're working from. As I say, this should reflect individual challenges, scale, resources, purpose, so for example, being in a rural setting. Be focused on areas where the evidence shows that there's underrepresentation, so not that just what you think is the case, but having evidence to show that there is underrepresentation in certain areas and where you will prioritise. Address the gaps in the programme for audiences and visitors, for engagement, workforce and board membership. And for there to be set and available resources, and resources obviously covers money, but also people and time. And to set smart objectives, so what actions will be taken, who's responsible, what time frame you're working to, and how this will be monitored and reviewed, because there's no point of having an equality action plan that nobody looks at. In terms of accountability, the organisation will need to know what the board is going to do to monitor progress. So is it going to be on all of the meeting agendas? Will it be discussed? Will the board direct what happens? Need to share the plans with all of the staff, and obviously this depends on how large or small the organisation is. You need to capture and report on the outcomes. And there is an equality action plan template included in the guides, which might be useful to some people who may not have an equality action plan or looking to revise their equality action plan. And we need to be able to share the learning with others. So this can mean producing case studies, meeting with other museums and having local events. So that's it in terms of equality action plan. So finally, what action can you take to contribute to create a case for diversity and deliver on equality action plans, and just a few things to think about. So how will you include diverse voices in planning your programme? How will you work with diverse practitioners in delivering your programme and in collections? How will you show and share the results of creating a case for diversity in programming and collections? And when and how will you monitor the effectiveness of your equality action plans? So that's me, thank you very much.